founder of the website God Talk Now, but his recent work, The Gathering at Gethsemane, and Reverend Ed Mulraine, our guest in studio. A busy man for a busy time, and happy 2009.
Happy 2009 to you, and it's good to see you always.
Good.
You look good.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you. We're good. Let's talk about this. At first, let's look at the cover of your book. It's a beautiful cover. It's a beautiful artistic cover. Talk about this work. It's an original piece.
Yeah, absolutely. This was done by a friend of mine who's an artist, and he's a college professor. And I gave him the idea and told him to run with it, and he created 3 pieces, and this was the piece that was chosen from that. And it's an original piece. No one else has it. I have all the rights to it, and I thought it would be best to best represent what we're talking about in terms of the gathering at Gethsemane. And if you look at the figure, it's in color. It's representative of Jesus at Gethsemane, and he captured every essence of it. Each color represents something: the purple, the royalty, and as well as death; the red, the figure of the African-American head, and the dichotomy that's going on where you see the various personalities coming out of that head. So you do see a lot going on in that picture, but it's an original piece, and he's a great artist, Randy Williams.
Randy Williams,
right?
Big shout out to him. You
Yeah.
talk a lot about the word Gethsemane. For those
Right.
people who aren't familiar, why did you use the title Gethsemane? What is Gethsemane?
Gethsemane is actually a place. The significance of that is more with Jesus at Gethsemane. It's a garden place. If you read throughout the Bible, Jesus often refrained there for rest. And at this particular time at Gethsemane is where you have him almost facing death, and where you have him bowing down. And he wants to, of course, came for the task of dying for humanity. But at this point is where he feels his most agony. And right here is where you see his flesh clashing with his spirit, because you hear him saying to God, take this cup away from me. But at the same time, when it comes time and he goes through prayer, he says, not my will, but thy will be done. But he also tells the disciples who are with him at that garden that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And he conveys that dichotomy, is what I call it. The dichotomy is the controversy that erupts within everybody and all of us. And here you have Jesus, who had saved so many. Jesus, who had been the epitome of perfection, struggling with the flesh. And what the book does is go into Gethsemane, because it's representative of a dichotomy internally of every person, whether they're in Christ or outside of Christ. You could talk about clergy, of course, that's what we talk about in the book, but you're also talking about every human being that struggles with something. And at Gethsemane is where we see Jesus struggling with his flesh over his spirit.
Let me talk about that word struggle for a minute, because in the book you deal with ministers, and ministers with a struggle in a way that sometimes we don't even often see. Let's share a little bit about that, because in your book you suggest a lot of ministers are struggling with something.
And like I said, everybody's struggling with something, but I think that there's this false perception out there, and many people have taken the minister, the clergy, the pastor to be one of perfection rather than one of still under construction. Because many pastors still have the flesh, and all of us still going through this flesh, we still have this flesh and this weakness that we have to battle with. Now, of course, the Spirit conveys that we're supposed to be higher in terms of our resistance, and clergy is supposed to be high in their resistance. But the truth of the matter is, under construction is still not perfection. You still have sensations, you still have temptation. Even Jesus himself had temptation. It's just how one handles temptation. And because one is still under the flesh, whether they're clergy or not clergy, whether they've been in the ministry for centuries, years, they still have to contend with this flesh, because they're not perfect in terms of their being. They're striving for perfection. So when people hear about pastors falling or ministers falling, we have to remember, although their indiscretions will face consequences, nobody's trying to make excuses for that, we still have to remember that pastors are still human. And some of the various indiscretion that we hear about is bad, but at the same time there's so many that everyone struggles with, that pastors themselves and preachers themselves struggle with.
But when you talk about it in the book, it's not just a fictitious exaggeration, because as you look around, you see throughout the church, you see, and we won't call names because there's so many names that you could possibly call, of major ministers, mega church ministers who go through divorce, who go through separation, who go through physical abuse, domestic violence, things of that nature. Talk to us, because you know, when you talk about that struggle, it's something that maybe sometimes it's not always echoed from the pulpit, but it's definitely spoken from in your book.
And I think that's where the pressure comes in on a lot of ministers, because they have to live up to this standard understanding of perfection. Because remember, people are looking to the minister for their own strength. And when they don't find it, or if they find a fallen minister, then they begin to say that, if I can't look to the minister, who can I look to? But then you have to see it on the other side, is that who can the minister look to in his times of struggle? And I don't think many people want to talk about that. And when you hear about them going through divorce, when you hear about them going through being caught with prostitutes, or when you hear about them leaving their children and leaving their church, getting up. I know a minister just got up, said, I'm fed up, left the church, and said that was it. And we can call one name because he's getting ready to put out a film called The Trials of Ted Haggard. And all of us know, and this book is in conjunction with us, we're talking to the producers and et cetera, but that shows, and Ted Haggard is straight up about it. He says, I love my wife, but I still struggle with my sexuality. So he's straight up about it. And I think that's one of the areas by which we have to talk about, where many don't talk about because of the perfection that's put upon them until they fall.
Let's talk about the pulpit a little bit more, because in addition to dealing with that issue of struggle, one of the other things that goes on in the church today, particularly with what's going on with Barack Obama, the issue of politics, and it's something that you really address in the book as well. It seems like ministers take strong biblical stands on these issues, and you know, although the book is a novel, there are some very real issues that go on. Talk about, why do you find it relevant to deal with these issues?
I think that shows the area where most of us look to pastors and preachers in terms of their intelligence, in terms of that area seems to be an area of perfection for most, with the way ministers can convey the word, mix it with the political and cultural, particularly in the African-American community, where you see Martin Luther King coming out of the civil rights movement and so many others. And I think people almost look to the ministers as a God in that area. So that does show a little more perfection in that area. But we talk about a lot of issues in this book. We go from the issue of abortion, current issues, civil rights, gay marriage. I mean, all of those are part of areas that are talked about in this book. And it's talked about from a biblical perspective. So everything we do in this book, just like our website, godtalknow.com, we try to address it from a biblical perspective. And it's argumentative. I mean, it's not meant to be anything in stone, but it shows how the ministers can be so perfected in their knowledge, understanding, and wisdom and biblical exegesis when it comes to these matters, that that's where people find that they're often looked upon as perfect.